All right, everybody, we're going to start. So welcome to PJ and I's house, what we lovingly call the outhouse. So feel free to grab coffee, food throughout the conference panel. The bathroom is over here in the hallway if anyone needs to use it. So just to give you a little bit of introduction to the Conference on the Couch format, for those of you who haven't been here before, we've been doing this every year. It's been really one of my favorite parts of the festival. The idea is to have a kind of salon-style conference that makes academic discussions, intellectual discussions more accessible to everyone, including really involving artists in the conversations, and not just, sort of ivory tower, right? So it's about kind of what the festival is trying to do more generally, which is kind of break down these barriers between disciplines and between different worlds. So our first panel today, which is the largest panel we've ever had, and maybe for a reason, because the topic I think is a really big topic and a really important topic for the moment. So it's Into the Wilds of Art Activism. So thinking about our contemporary moment and the role that art might be able to play in fighting back against all the various forms of oppression and fascism, etc., that have always been there, of course, but are becoming even more pronounced in certain ways in the past year or so. So without further ado, I will introduce our wonderful moderator for the first panel of the Conference on the Couch 2017. Is Karma Chávez, who comes originally from the University of Wisconsin, yes, is that correct? And now is at UT in Mexican, American, and Latinx Studies. That's correct, right? And we'll be facilitating the panel today. The basic format is the panelists will all kind of have a sort of casual conversation for 30-40 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up to all of you guys to chime on in.
Thank you.
And just one quick note, we are recording this audio-wise, which we'll make available in case anybody wants to talk about it.
Right on, well, thank you all for being here. I'm going to introduce the panelists. I found your bios variously, so if they're wrong, you can tell me. But I'll introduce all the panelists, and then I thought we could open up. I had sent some questions to folks yesterday, just kind of some starters, and so I'll open up, kind of express what those were, and then I figured we could just go around and everybody could kind of say an opening little piece, and then we'll just have a conversation from there.
Oh, before you, there's one really important thing I forgot, sorry to interrupt. Sabotage, who is on our panel, is our exhibition artist throughout the Conference on the Couch, so you'll notice their work is on the walls there and up here, so please check it out during the conference and after the conference. And yeah, sorry.
That's perfect. Right on. All right, so let's meet our panelists. So here on the corner where no one can probably see is Luisa Petrisko, an artist working in music, video, dance, and performance. And Jeepneys is that how you say it? Did I say that right? Named after the iconic converted World War II Army Jeeps of the Philippines. Her work investigates the complexities of post-colonial identity and encompasses a multitude of experience of time, space, and self. Took that from your website. Soprano and sound artist Micaela Tobin specializes in contemporary voice, so I'm just going to go around the circle, except for these two are divided and then they're together, but otherwise. As a sound artist, Micaela writes and performs her own experimental music under the moniker White Boy Scream, in which she dissects her operatic style of singing through the use of electronic effects pedals. Next here is Jose Santabria and Olivia Warner, visual and performance artists living in Puerto Rico. Jose is from Puerto Rico and Olivia is from the U.S. Virgin Islands. And they're part of the art collective Cuniclo, which is a collective of 4 members formed in 2014. They curate their lives and workspace on a small farm in the mountains of Trujillo Alto. Their practice centers around themes of nature, queer sexuality, Puerto Rican culture, and investigations into literary philosophical theory. Beside Jose is Mocha Herrup, is known for performing as Lance Bass in Billy Idol. When I went to your website, I was like, oh shit, yeah, I can totally see that. They make films that reveal the organization of power using humor and alternative documentary practices, writing prose that could use the word very less often, creating visually driven works that tell stories with pictures, words, and interaction, taking a performative approach to conflict and beauty, and eating butter by itself all the time.
But my latest work is on Israel and Palestine, and my activist work is with Jewish voiceovers.
Right on.
So, no, thank you.
Can I make it serious? Okay. Fine.
I wrote that shit.
Butter eater.
That's good. So this again is Olivia, and then to Olivia's right is Rotimi how did I say your name?
Agbabiaka.
Agbabiaka. I hate it when people do that to me, so I apologize for doing that to you. Was born in Nigeria and moved to Katy, Texas at the age of 14, where he stumbled upon a theater audition while waiting for his mom to pick him up after school. He's done a lot of work, including a solo play, Homeless, that won Best Solo Performance at the San Francisco Fringe Festival, directed plays in the San Francisco 1 Minute Play Festival, and also teaches youth theater programs. And then next to Rotimi is Nadia Granados, a Colombian performance artist who uses her body in combination with multimedia technologies to explore relationships between the representation of state violence in mainstream media, institutionalized machismo, heterosexual pornography, and violence against women. And next to Nadia is Rebecca, who's doing interpretation in Spanish. Rebecca Jackson, who's a grad student in radio, television, and film, and Latin American studies. And here next to Rebecca is Amber Bemak, who teaches filmmaking at Southern Methodist University. Her work is based in experimental and documentary film. Amber's experimental work focuses on themes of cross-cultural encounters in the context of globalization, performative explorations of the body in relation to greater political systems, and often utilizes found footage fragments from her own life. So, exciting group of folks that we have put together here. So I sent some questions around, and I'll just read those, and then maybe we just, like I said, go around, and whoever wants to jump in and give everybody a chance to say, and then we'll have a conversation. So given the title of the panel, questions I posed were basically what counts as activist art? Is political art or art deemed political due to its subject matter the same as activist art? What ways do you see art intervening in the politics of the contemporary moment? And how is this moment similar to or different from others? And how has digital media and social networking impacted the relationship between arts and politics? So you can respond to all or none of that. But those are the thought questions to get us rolling. So who wants to jump in and offer some initial thoughts? Okay, great. Good. Everybody jump in.
I could jump in.
Cool,
Maybe,
thank you.
I don't know. Yeah, I was looking at your questions yesterday. I think the first thing I thought in terms of political art versus activist art is that I think all art is political, even if it's not, even if it doesn't designate itself as such, or if people don't, even if the themes aren't explicitly political. I think people are political. I think making art is a political act. I think telling a story is a political act, and who gets to tell that story, whose story gets told, is very much a function or a reflection of society, of politics, of the structures that make up our society, or the ideas that we live by. So I think all art is political, to answer that question, and then I think activist art is art that recognizes that condition and decides to use the function of art to fight the status quo. So, yeah.
Yes. I am thinking in the same way yesterday when I reviewed the questions, because I think they have a big impact in the society. And I think in other way, the official system have them artists too. Like many people are working with that people, like with a lot of power, and they have a big incidence in the society because they have all the media, all the ways for that thing. No, they put their ideas over all people because they can manipulate that, and all the art have that kind of art have a big ideology, and for that is really dangerous and really we can say no the things happens no, and it's like hiding. And usually they say like political art is the art of activism or against the system, but all art have this implicit, and for that is very important no, begin with questions about that from the borders no, from with our little weapons and together.
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking to Jim last night, and he mentioned this quote: "A fascist regime can only exist with a fascist culture, if there is a fascist culture in
Yes,
place."
it's fascist.
And so that makes me just think about the moment that we're in right now, and what produces it. What is the culture we live in, and how is that culture created and maintained through art, through what we consume as art as a society, or what we disseminate, or what's disseminated. And I think the idea of there being these, who has the resources, who gets to be featured, and who is promoted by these power structures that produce, our current president and all the attendant, forces. So that's, I think that idea of like really exposing the fact that all the media is political.
Yes,
All
and
the
it's
art is
art.
political. Yeah.
And they have a big artist work for them.
Yeah.
Like really amazing writers, really amazing actors,
Yeah.
performers.
Yeah.
They have all this big, ¿cómo se dice?
Yeah.
Factory
Yeah.
for
big
produce
industry,
ideology,
yeah.
and it's like hiding, no?
Mhm.
It's like it's really evidence, but
Yeah.
usually people, this not is art.
Yeah.
This is not art. Art is in the museums,
Yeah.
and the official art is we are in the museums, we are in the theaters,
Yeah.
we are in the festivals,
Yeah.
but we are not in the street or doing a lot of production like for whatever space. No, is the thing art is in the museums? No,
Yeah.
art is in many places. No, it's like and in the TV,
Yeah.
and it's cheap art, but it doesn't matter if it's
Yeah.
cheap.
Yeah.
It's like
Effect.
the thing affect. I think that thing have a lot of power over ourselves too.
Yeah.
For me, this affect all my life, or like each one of my acts too. And I think first thing is how you broke this thing inside you too.
Yeah.
Because it's really deep. Your fears, your many things inside you from this stupid, horrible system.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important point about like where art exists and how it's defined. And that like within contemporary art, this idea of context is so important. Like there's an understanding that there's no neutral space, that the white space does not exist as a neutral space in galleries and museums. And things like television are not necessarily defined as art in the same way. However, they greatly impact our culture. And like who is it that interacts with art in galleries? Understanding that like based on class lines, which is really, intersects with race really strongly in this country, like who gets to experience art in that way, who gets to understand or is empowered to know that making a meal for other folks is considered a form of contemporary art. So just that knowledge is like confined to folks who have a certain level of access. And then, on the other side of it, thinking about like protest as one example in the streets, like this is a performance, this is something that like it's happening in public space for a purpose, it's happening with other people for a purpose, blocking the streets or performing die-ins, like these are acts of public and community art, and I think that isn't always the way that it's thought about, and something that could be developed further through some like intentional choices there.
Did I skip your introduction?
Yeah.
Kind of.
I was thinking that.
Sure. Yeah, I was just like, wait a minute. I started in the corner and I've been talking to you. I'm going to introduce you right now. A lot of bravado and humility. That wisdom you just heard was from Saba, who is a mixed media visual artist and activist from North Carolina. Her work explores American Muslim identity and challenges the current climate of Islamophobia. She also uses art as a way of examining her own identity as a queer Muslim. And I'm an asshole, and I apologize for that.
Well, the way I was thinking about art activism, which I think can overlap with a lot of what we're talking about, but I approached it as my experience of being involved in art activism, moving from art activism within an organizational structure to more of personal activist art because of the access. So meaning like my first art activism was back in the 80s with ACT UP. And thinking about Incarnation, bad name, but good project. But how the effective art activism, or kind of effective art activism, was coming from such a point of privilege, because especially the New York ACT UP demographics, which was, I mean, hugely, in my opinion, successful and like very slick, like looked like advertising images, because a lot of folks were, right, Jim, like in the advertising agency or involved in that. And so you had the production of videos and posters that we just take so much for granted now, of course, but back then it was like you had to have capital to produce a video. You had to have capital to create effective posters and print them out, you know, go to Kinko's, and right, it's very expensive. And how that's, and like kind of bringing that sense of entitlement to the art activism, but it being extremely effective entitlement in that way. So I was reflecting on that, and then I was thinking of like immediately what popped in my head about art activism today was the pussy grabs back meme that appeared online right after one of the debates, and how just satisfying it was for me to grab that image, and it was like a cat. You love it, Current? Pussy grabs back. A lot of people saw that on Facebook and just put that as my Facebook picture, and that activism was very satisfying to me on a very personal level, because I felt like, oh, okay, I can like connect with other people who are feeling the same way as I do, and not feel as, I don't know, despairing. Of course, I had every reason to be despairing at that point, but it's, yeah, not posting it on Facebook as if I'm going to change the world and reach anybody that I haven't already reached, but activism within a different model of, I don't know, keeping us sane.
Yeah. I like everything that people are saying, because I think it's really important to expand what our idea of what activism is and what art is. And I really responded to what you said, like making your friend's dinner is contemporary art. Because I think right now, I think there's a challenge, and I think it's really fed by social media to like be able to take care of ourselves and take care of each other, because like we're all like, everyone's like spinning out, and like we just like briefly talked about it with Celeste in the kitchen, like just like you almost like feel bad if you're doing good right now, because it's like, you know, you're like, the world is suffering so much, like I shouldn't be feeling good, but like I think that like my activism right now, I'm really trying to like focus on the micro and like really focus on self-care, because I feel like that's gonna ripple out, and like influence, like if my cells are healthy, then like I can ripple out into everyone else's cells and the cells of the planet, and yeah, taking care of each other. I think it's really like going into the social media thing, it's like, it's really,
I don't know, it just feels so, it's just like this Black Mirror episode, you know, like everybody's online talking about Standing Rock, and it's like, that's good, like we should be talking about Standing Rock, but it's also like, we should also have Indigenous friends, we should be taking care of, like I feel like a lot of my friends who are Indigenous, like, felt really fucked up during, like, the whole, like, media blitz about Standing Rock, because it was like, everybody's online trying to be like the best activist possible, but like nobody's ever like checked in with them, you know, or they've checked in only because of Standing Rock, and it feels really artificial, you know, and it's just like, yeah, it's just like, and then that's like, then Trump got elected and like no one talked about Standing Rock anymore, and before that was Black Lives Matter. So it's just like there's like these cycles of trendy activism. And it just doesn't feel like, I just hope like we're doing that, but we're also like just on a interpersonal level, like taking care of ourselves and taking care of our friends and like making sure that, you know, we're getting fed and, and like we're having this beautiful like gathering and like, and that we're like doing like, you know, we're doing good and we're happy about like, you know, the blessings that we have, like being here and, you know, not being in like a more fucked up place right now, and just trying to like really take care of ourselves, so then maybe that energy can ripple out, you know, into the world.
Kind of going off of what you guys were saying, these questions really brought up for me a thing that we've been talking a lot about in our group of like queer utopianism, of like trying to create for ourselves and being open for other people of like isolated but connected queer utopias that we can use as like a network of resistance, and really striving to take care of each other and like having our spaces be open to each other, and have that be a form of activism within our groups of creating and holding space for each other, and like making space available and cooking for each other and gardening for each other, and just the concept of space that we can maintain and control and have present for ourselves and our peers and our loved ones and people who need it, and that being like a form of really accessible and important activism right now, especially in face of raids and in face of all the different things that are happening in this country, of maintaining like a safer space for ourselves and people who are at higher risk than ourselves, and like making that a priority.
Yeah, I think going off this wonderful conversation, I think one of the great things that art can do is inspire and is imagine too. I mean, I think that's one of the most powerful things we have as artists or as human beings, and I think artists tap into that, is the imagination. And I think creating I love cooking is a form of art, because it's
relational
it's
aesthetics.
And there isn't much done insinuating, but there is something really beautiful about the idea of exploring what it means to be in relationship with people, and how to do it in a way that's perhaps more healthy than than most other ways that relationships happen in society, and the idea of creating your own vision of utopia or of the future, and then having that be inspiring to people, or be something that inspires a different way of living, of thinking about how we can live in this world. And I think when we think about what activist art, that's one of the things I think that it can do, is give us a vision for what kind of world do we want to live in, and how do we create that in a work of art and have that influence society. So I think that's really exciting to think about those possibilities.
Lately in this current political climate, one way that I've been, I guess, feeling like I'm contributing to some activism is I teach in your body, so youth theater. I also teach voice and music. I've worked in a lot of nonprofits, and I do like one-on-one lessons, and so I've found that I've just really been putting
so much more energy into my students and just like really working on empowering them on an individual level. And I feel like as artists, that is definitely one avenue that I think can save, I don't want to sound cliche, but I really do think can like save this world or save this society is really empowering our youth and like taking all of these types of concepts that seem kind of can seem complicated and, you know, really intellectual and trying to find ways to communicate them to our students and to like live that for our younger, you know, generation, because they're really the light, I think, that can keep us going and keep like the apocalypse from coming or whatever the hell is gonna happen. But yeah, I definitely feel like, you know, because when you're tired and we're overworked and we're broke and rent's coming up and it's like, God, I just don't have the energy to go in and teach today, and like they're, you know, they don't pay attention or whatever. But I don't know, lately I've been feeling a renewed sense of like, I'm here for you, like, you know, this is about the music lesson, but this is also just like sitting with someone for an hour a week. You may be the only person as a teacher and an educator that tells them, you know, looks in their eyes and says, you're special, you're someone, I see you, I hear you. And I think that is like a very powerful form of activism, and just like, yeah, I've been focusing a lot more on, you know, as big government just becomes more and more fascist and evil, like focusing on the community, our underground communities, the DIY communities, and what we can do to help each other and create space for each other. Yeah, what we can do for our kids, and I think that's, yeah, I feel like that's where the energy and the focus is going in terms of activism.
Yeah, I think about like there's multiple sides because art is so huge. I mean, to like be to be human, I feel like is to be creative, just from the jump, like right out of the womb. But there's, you know, a side of it that's incredibly empowering in that art is healing. It's a place for self-determination and agency, and you know, even as just existing as being creative, if it's not something that we feel like we have agency in, that we're just moving through capitalism and surviving, that feeling of empowerment isn't exactly there. So I feel like that's a really important component in like who is given access to this healing, to this form of self-determination. And then on the other side, art is a communicative tool. I'm thinking about like ACT UP and this like advertisement style of communication, which is really broadly accessible because of consumerism and because of capitalism. Like, and that's something to understand, like that there's limitations there, like what is the context of that, but it's broadly accessible. Same with memes, that kind of thing. That it can be, I guess I think about it like as a gateway drug. It's like, you know, that meme doesn't exactly change anything, but like, you're communicating something, you're bringing people into something, it becomes like large and public, people can get behind an image for whatever reason. I feel like I was politically activated through Facebook because I had one radical friend who was posting stuff that I like didn't get for a while and then eventually was eating up. And so folks who are alienated, who are in isolation, who might have this kind of access to the internet can find ways in. And I think after that point, though, an important question is how does this translate into systemic change? So as well, you know, as much as we can create alternative structures, those alternative structures are always at risk if we're not also impacting these systems that can, you know, crack down on you because of your taxes, you know. And so I feel like that's something that I'm thinking a lot about, is how as artists we are working concretely to make change, also understanding and uplifting all of the other layers of like healing and self-determination and making meals for each other and creating community and how essential that is. But what is that next step? And also speaking off to what Micaela was saying, like this focus on your students, I think also reflects like big government, how do you interact with that? You post these memes, whatever, but like on the local level, this is how the right gained power, was like from cities and states. And so we can do the same thing on the left. And I think like on the side of like folks doing political work, often they're not utilizing art and artists in the ways that they really could to make this work that much more accessible and powerful. And on the other side, art in many ways is inaccessible to many individuals in the way that we like know it and are privileged to experience it.
I think your vision of art as expressed through community or as community is really exciting, and the political system making better use of art. And I'm also curious, because this is something that I'm struggling with, like, and I'm in a room with artists, I'm struggling with, like, is it weird to do anything that isn't directly involved, like addressing Donald Trump? It feels odd to me. It feels like I'm in a burning building and I'm talking about Israel, which, Israel-Palestine, which is absolutely related. But, right, not in the way of, like, fascism taking over our country. So, I guess artists, how are you approaching this current moment, like, in terms of what you want to produce? I just can't think of doing anything else but.
Well, what we like to do in our group is that what Olivia was talking about, we create this world that it's like an utopia, but like also it's as real as this world. We are not so focused on the message. We are more focused on the sensorial stimulation, because that way you can get to people's brain, and you can stay there longer, and you can make them not think about what's right or wrong, but change the method of thinking rather than in your face, this is bad, this is good. Like, every people have a sensibility, everybody, but we need our job is to bring back the sensibility that have been lost. So we transform ourselves into like creatures, and we transform the space into like a playground, into like a mash of feelings, ideas that we all express through movement. And even though people after like are like, what is it are they talking about? But it reminds me like, no, but it's, but and then that process is what for us enriches us and like make the political changes, because
Yeah, I think I would say that this current moment and what's happening in this country is it's much bigger than just Donald Trump, or even this regime. I mean, it's a culmination of all sorts of things, or the apotheosis of so many things, and I think there's so many different ways to address the whether it's consumerism, or whether it's our inability to feel empathy for other people, or to feel anything really, or whether it's the way that like the business and entrepreneurship has become so elevated in this culture that we think a business person is the highest form of human life. The way the way that it's the liberal sort of class in this country is sort of rejected a working class analysis of a lot of the oppression that goes on in this country, or shies away from it. I think there's so many different elements, and I think there's many different fronts on which activist art can operate, whether it's reminding people to feel, and not necessarily saying explicitly this is, but because I think all of that is part of why we live in this moment right now. So to answer, or to respond to your question, I would say, there's many ways, and I think talking about Israel-Palestine is definitely very important and very much a part of what is wrong with our world right now.
Ultimately, the work is a critique of nationalist, racialist capitalism. But that is great.
Yeah.
And the building's burning.
But I think that's been going on all over the world for a long time, and maybe even here. Not that this isn't really an intense moment, but I think, yeah, and I think, I mean, even like this is a conversation that we've actually had, that we were having recently, like when Trump first got elected, you know, obviously it was really hard to get out of bed for like a couple, and you know, we were talking and Nadia was saying to me, like, do you think the world is ending now? Like, the world ended for people, a lot of people in other countries because of your country. And we just
are doing many things.
Yeah, and I think we have a history of xenophobia that's really deep in us. And so I think that although it's important to focus on what's happening here, I think it's also important to really look at how what's happening here is affecting other countries too, and how it's even been affecting other countries. And this plan with our, you know, our foreign policy has been really going on for quite a while, just as another aspect of it. So I don't think it's bad. I think everyone, if you're addressing anything at all, that's great. And just on going off of, I was thinking about students. I usually try to like mute when I say where I work. It's called Southern Methodist University. I'm like, right from here. And I'm new there. I'm new there. Yes, it's all feminine. But I think like one thing that I've been thinking about, having worked with lots of different students in different situations, is that in this particular new job that I'm in, my students have a lot of money. I'm teaching them art, I'm teaching storytelling, film, and they're gonna have power. They already have power. And as like a white, you know, queer person who's like can be straight passing, you know, I have a lot of in who I am. I feel like it's my work right now to speak to those students. Like it's like I wanna, because I'm like sneaking in there or something in a way, and I'm like. It's like I'm speaking to these like predominantly white, like very privileged students, and even yesterday I was talking to them about how narratives of colonization are running through all of our stories, through many of our stories, you know, even our political, and how stories, and obviously stories are everything right now, right? Like that's the whole political thing is like fact and fiction and stuff like that. And just doing that, it's like I just have like just standing there in front of these people who literally are like, we're coming from so far, like they're so far, you know? And I think that if any of us have, well, anyway, everyone does what they can, but if, like for me, it's like if I have the opportunity to use the privilege that I have to speak to other people who have a similar privilege and kind of try to like get them to do something, you know? Like that's what I'm, and I don't care about how uncomfortable it feels, because it's fine, you know? It's just like every day just trying with each one of them, and some of them aren't going to do anything. The people who are teaching, like everyone who teaches probably knows that, but some of them change, and that feels like a microcosmic thing, because they're going to be making the stories for our culture. So that's like, but I also have a lot of ideas and also really want support around that, like with other educators to figure out. So that's, I'm just putting that.
I think too, just like diversity of tactics is really important, and that's something that like the left has a lot of issues with, I think, is like respecting diversity of tactics, of being like, okay, that's your tactic, I have solidarity with you, even though I'm not engaging in that particular form of activism. And like that, the lack of solidarity can lead to a lot of infighting, which is really not fun at this time. And so just like having solidarity for other different people's forms of activism, and like, you know, if someone wants to do hyper politicized art, being like, yeah, that's go for it. If someone else is doing more like street activism, like, yeah, go for it. Having like a network of solidarity, rather than, you know, putting your form of activism as like higher or more effective than someone else's. Just like offering your solidarity and support to other activists who are engaging within their capacity, doing what they can, I think is really important, rather than, you know, kind of trying to one up or call into question someone else's engagement.
Yeah, especially in public. I'm like, so it's so hurtful to see that happening, like on social media, like brown friends calling out other brown friends, like for, you know, I mean, we all make mistakes here and there, you know, and like we're all like trying to do our best. It's really, really hurtful to see like people from the same side tearing each other down or calling each other out or pointing fingers, like as publicly as possible. I find that like a really hard thing. I mean, I love social media for its tools and its way to build community and be, you know, inspire activism. And I also see it being like this really, I worry. And I myself have spun out and gotten a lot of anxiety from it and been feeling really shitty after using it. So that's really, yeah, I think sometimes it feels like the building is burning faster or like worse than it maybe is, or like the earth has been burning like all during our entire lifetimes, you know, not that that's a good thing obviously, but like it's just, yeah, it's fucked up out there, but we gotta, take care of each other, take care of ourselves.
I think the thing about art and activism too is like people fight because people wants to like scholarships and prizes and to be and sometimes activism and art have this problem. For example, I was working in Colombia really deep in activism, and I never told people like, this is my art. This is work with farmers, and this don't have any sense. Say, this is my art, because art for me is other thing in a way. When you are with people, and these people are killing each week, and you are saying, I take photos of this, and I put an exhibition about that. This is really different. You can't work with that in art, in an exhibition, in galleries, in something, in your career, because artists are a relation with academy, have relation with a career too. It's not like I am doing these things without interest. No, I think, for example, I have an interest. I am working on that. I apply for this festival. It's not I am like, I don't have interest. And the point is, when these things have relation with that other things, is that things about activism have relation with with violence, have relation with other life. With that, we have a privileged life. We can decide to go for places. We don't have that problems, and work with the problem of others, really deep in that is crazy in a way. For me, I think use that images or use that problem for begin my career is a big deal. It's not easy. It's not, and in that way, I think that is a big problem with the relation between art and activism, because sometimes people going for a place with problems and take photos and say, we can make this activism activity and buy, and after go for the scholarship, go for the prizes, and never back for the places. And you can't use that in stories. For me, really hard this situation, or really, because it's real. They die, and the violence is in other places too. And the other thing is you can have a message, you can make many things with your art, but the art is a thing too. It's a creation, and a specific creation with objects, with specific things in our history for me. No, like about image, about how you tell histories, about how you take the reality and you put again this thing in the world, and how you present these things in front of others, because others come for save you, and these others could be from whatever place. Ellos pueden venir de cualquier lugar.
Yeah, they can come from anywhere.
My English is hard, but it's an idea like about if you have a show or something, you are talking about something, and this is the moment when you have contact with others, and in many ways. If you're going with this in the street, for yourself, in internet, in whatever place, no? If in a museum, in a gallery, or in a festival, or in the corner, for yourself or for others, or institutions or without institutions.
But you do talk about that stuff in your work, and we do too. So you talk about these violences and stuff.
Yes, and
So
I
what
take
is
that,
that
but
for
the
you?
point is not. I not use directly
The
that
people.
things. That things are in whatever place. That things affected my life too.
Sure.
But it's not like exactly I going for that,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's really hard because it's their life.
Yeah.
And you after say bye, and it's really hard because usually you can. Many people work in that way, and it's not a bad intention usually, but the relation between art and institutions and all these things and our career, because it's a profession, is really weird, because sometimes I am an artist interested in activism, but I can't touch money. I don't pay me, please. It's like, why? Is your profession or what? But what is really an ethical conversation about? It's really long, but sometimes you are working with people and people don't pay you. All people take money, the lawyer, the el sociólogo, el antropólogo,
The anthropologist.
todos. But the artist is like,
But the artist doesn't get anything.
but the point is how you work with that, how you can. It's really hard because usually your work is not work, but when it's work, it's complex too. Because if you take advantage of how you take advantage of, because you need live. Tú necesitas vivir de algo.
You have to live from something.
And it's hard. It's hard because it's how you put this in relation to your professional way. Why have a big universities for artists with teachers take money. No, the director take money. But usually it's you go and made art, and it's like, it's a really hard profession too. Okay, not tell more, but
Yeah, I mean, that's a great, issue and conundrum. I think that's, one thing that makes something like this event really exciting. That a sort of DIY, an alternative space to maybe another kind of arts festival that might be a little more, institutional, a little more wed to those sort of pressures. But that is one of the tough things right now, is that we live in this capitalist society, and a lot of art production or the necessity just to survive and to eat, makes us have to be part of these institutions or buy into this art system that's very much driven by money and what can you sell and how can you take someone else's or your own exploitation and use that to monetize it. How do you monetize your suffering? Or someone else's suffering. And that's real. I think a lot of us, so how do you fight that? I don't know. I'm just reiterating the question, but how do you get outside of that or share your story or other stories in a way that feels, because I think going and reporting on an event that's happening is very important, and there are of course blurred lines, blurred areas of where is this self-beneficial and where is this actually me just going and telling a story that needs to be told so people can hear it and do something about it or learn about it. It's blurry. So, I don't have an answer. I don't know why I'm just rambling now. I just want to reiterate that I too ask the same questions or think about these things, and how can we create a model that doesn't feed into the overriding model that seems to be so consuming, of everything, co-opting of everything too, So I don't know. Someone has answers. Anyone's gonna answer that.
So I thought maybe we can move into the bigger conversation, since it's a little bit afternoon and we've got a ton of themes here that I'm sure many of you are excited to engage with with the panelists about relating to these issues of capitalism and ethics and work, related to this tension between sort of our utopian longings and systemic change, related to kind of the ideological underpinnings of different kinds of art production, whether it's the kind of mainstream, very well supported versus more DIY, the relationship of all of this to pedagogy and teaching, the relational aesthetics and building modes of self-care, and tapping into these lost sensibilities, among many other themes. So I'm trying to summarize a few of the key themes there, that maybe you all have an interest in contributing to here. And so we'd love to hear from you, and if you wouldn't mind saying who you are when you offer a comment, and if you want to direct it at a panelist or offer a question or however you'd like with some, and obviously you all feel free to continue contributing here as we go, but just wanted to open it more broadly.
Okay, so I'm Heather Barfield. I'm the Associate Artistic Director of Vortex Theater, amongst many hats I wear. So, what about beauty and art, right? So here's the thing for me that is something that I think artists are forgetting in the activism that we do, that humor, comedy, parody, satire, and then beauty and beautiful things. In my mind, this tends to be what I'm being more and more drawn to right now, because the anger and the rage has consumed me to the point of self-destruction, and it's breaking me down. So every day I'm trying to find art that sings to me in a way that is beautiful. The art on this wall here, really looking at these things and the care and love and the beauty and the horror behind, some of the images too, but just the act of doing it itself, to me, is extraordinarily anti-establishment, anti-fascist, and it's looking within oneself to find the beautiful things through the horror. So anyway, I guess my that's really sort of where I'm at with some of this right now, because I'm very confused about my place as an artist and as an administrator and an activist. Like, what am I doing? And am I doing enough? And I've just decided that's it. I'm going to cook for my friends. I'm going to write on my own. I'm going to continue to journal. I'm going to keep meditating. Yes. And I'm going to just join in groups where I feel uncomfortable sometimes, but I'm going to do it anyway, and I'm going to listen, except now I'm talking. Right? And so I just wanted to hear your thoughts about, in particular, where does beauty fit for you as an artist?
It doesn't matter beauty, for example. I think Ayana Gani's beauty is like a valor, ¿cómo se dice?
A value.
A value, because I come from ugly places, and I think ugly is a value too. It's como people put something, and it's an opinion about it. You say things and say, this poor house is ugly, and this beautiful, like clean place is a good thing, no? And good things are in a way, and bad things are hiding or something that is how you can say the things too, in a way.
Also, I totally understand what you're saying, and I just was thinking, like, putting out the possibility that the essence of anger and rage is incredibly beautiful.
Yeah.
The rage
or maybe not even the essence, maybe even the manifestation. Beauty is really embedded in every texture.
It's
possible. So
it's complicated. It's complicated.
It is complicated. Yeah.
Beauty isn't clean either, and you said the word clean, and I was like, no es limpia. It's not always clean.
Yes. No.
Yeah.
And what is clean anyway?
What is clean?
That's the other question. So
I hate beauty because beauty usually is a word in relation with some things.
Yeah.
Like
with
no, but it's
capitalist,
like
corporate.
the good things are beauty and the other things are bad.
Right.
And for example, I feel more empathy for bad things like rage, but I think it's a really hard topic. And two, because I don't talk very good English. I don't understand the how culturally because she told a lot of things.
Yeah, I think like just to like really personally kind of get into what is happening in this work
Yes.
and that element of beauty and the grotesque.
Yes.
You know, like growing up, one thing that hasn't been mentioned here, I'm just gonna like drop is white supremacy,
Yes.
and how when we talk about all these single issues that are really interconnected, that's like kind of what we're getting at. That, you know, Palestine and Israel is relating.
It's a white supremacist issue.
Absolutely, and Donald Trump in the presidency is a white supremacist in the White House, and so like considering beauty and what's considered beautiful within that context, you know, I remember it being 5 years old. I went to a like very waspy, very conservative private school where I was one of two people of color in a small class, and I kept being told that I had to be the monster when we played games on the playground. And so there was a sense that I didn't even have words for, that something about me was grotesque. And there's so many layers to that, but I think like in this work it's harnessing that dehumanization that's happening there, but instead of allowing it to lie in that space, instead having it become heroic. And so I think this like moving into not, you know, what's traditionally beautiful, but fucking that up a little bit with things that are considered grotesque, understanding that those value judgments are coming from a specific agenda. And so pushing back against that is incredibly powerful and can be glittery.
Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Jim Florat, and my roots go back a long, long way to the Open Theater and the Living Theater in the 50s and the 60s. And I want to talk about today, and I'm so glad the word beauty was mentioned, and comedy and humor. I think it's really important, particularly for feminist and queer spirit, to really own our own expression rather than taking on a heterosexual anger template. We can be angry, we can be passionate, but I think we have a very particular filter our life experience and our survival experiences about how we do it. And I think the Queen's sense of humor, for example, you know, that kind of way of survival that we have developed is very, very important to position at this particular moment. I'm active in two groups right now. One is Gays Against Guns, which started last June after the Pulse shooting. And it is, the gay in the title caused some controversy, but we decided to keep it because it's inclusive of anyone who wants to join us. We don't see why someone couldn't identify with a word that is not exclusive in our terms. We developed a lot of actions that had artists' input into how it looked and what it did. I don't know if any of you have seen the shroud figure that Trigger Ferguson developed, but we have figures that are in all of our actions, just completely dressed in white, with a veil, holding a poster of someone who was shot at any one of the different mass shootings, completely silent. It's a very vivid confrontation with what the reality of gun violence does, and it's been very, very effective. Even got on the front page of the New York Times with this particular image. So thinking about what the representation is, and so the sense of beauty, which is subjective, and I can't layer my definition of beauty on you. I can only be true to my own sense of beauty. In Rise and Resist, we actually have divided people into affinity groups, and the artist affinity groups are very much in existence and are producing imagery that is not voted on by everyone in the group. There's nothing worse than trying to have a group consensus on an artistic statement. Tuesday night, Auburn Finkelstein, who was one of the people in grand jury that developed the Silence Equals Death, which seems is ACT UP's logo. It was not. It was developed before ACT UP. It was used by ACT UP. Those artists developed that on their own. And when it was presented at the ground meeting of ACT UP, it was voted down. And the people continued to use it and became emblematic of that particular moment. Right now, we have a group of people that go around singing. We just had our Bloody Valentine chorus. And we try to incorporate people who say, oh, I'm not an artist, I'm not a performance into this. And the person who organized it, Mark Lemonov, writes these very non-traditional, very contemporary lyrics to very traditional, recognizable songs that everyone comes over and listens to. We do them in public spaces. It's that kind of activity which is somehow missing in a lot of the anger and rage which we feel, of course. But I just want to challenge the artists to be true to themselves. You know, find out what the issue is and how you, in your expression, wish to do it, and not genuflect at any politically correct altar or listen to someone other than your own muses or the collective that you work with. We found it very helpful for people to work together who have the same spirit. Right now, our big campaign is against Steve Bannon. And we're ridiculing him. We're just making fun of him. We're just getting every kind of image because he's an evil. He's evil. That's a Catholic word, evil, but because he identifies as a right-wing Catholic, as do many of the people that are in positions of power.
So I'm gonna jump in there just to get some responses here. I see various looks on faces here among the artists who are on stage. I don't know if anyone wants to respond and get some just sort of feeding on this kind of the comment that is made in relation to again this question of beauty and finding sort of that tension with anger and beauty. I know if folks had any
I
thoughts.
think, for example, other thing for Brock is the macho image. Like, I think now it's really a big monster. This macho attitude is like the men kill others, the men put violence over others, and they things have the reason. It's like a big thing for destroy or for, it's like these people is angry, and I think the point about the humor or about ironical things or this angry, no, it's good to put other kind of feelings in the world too, no, because this kind of man is like, I think in Colombia, for example, is really deep this culture, like a macho thing in all the society. And it's like in your family, in the people, in many places, no? This paramilitary empathy. And I think it's necessary fight with that in explicit way, like feminism way. Is really important now. Like many people don't understand anything about that. No.
About what?
About feminism. It's like really big confusion in many places. And when you have the opportunity to talk about that, it's good too, because the fight is real. No, these people are working in a really clear way. For me, that contents are really specific, are really and are in all the places. I think it's a really big monster too, and they use the big tools or put in the mains that ideology, no? And the people born with this natural condition, and I think it's okay.
I have a clarifying question. Sorry.
Jim.
Huh?
Hi. I was wondering if you could clarify a little further what you were saying about like political correctness and folks being true to their own voice as something that is missing.
Tonight is an example. If you go see Witch Camp, I think that Nathan is which is at 10 o'clock tonight at the Vortex. Nathan is always, which I first saw Nathan perform here at South by Southwest in a completely straight dude event, and came out and was very true to who Nathan is in representation, but also in inner spirit. And that's what I mean. You find perhaps I should not abuse political correctness as it's a trigger word, but you find be true to your own, to who you are, and how you want to present yourself in the world, and not be no self-censoring around quote-unquote political correctness. I think that resonates in a very creative way. It's unfettered by trying to please others, but finding your own views. That's what I meant.
Yeah. I think that some of that resonates and some of that I question a little bit, because there are ways that I censor myself. There are ways that I have also transformed over time, and that it doesn't necessarily make me not feel free, because it comes from a place of recognizing that I need to be accountable to the impact of, what I produce and how it impacts other folks. That I think like the roots of my politic are that everyone deserves dignity and everyone deserves empathy. And it's this dividing people along these lines, which is a huge tactic of domination, and why things I think exist the way that they do. And so, there's so many ways that I think about, am I appropriating my own culture? That's a question that comes up sometimes, being someone that grew up in the US who has these kind of vulnerable bonds to my own history. And then at the same time, I recognize that I can push through that, but there are things that I'm not going to touch because they're not mine. Even though I might have feelings about it, and I think like those are moments censoring is one thing, but like to step aside and make space for other folks to come in and fill in those questions. But I think like this, like stepping tenderly through the subject matter is a beautiful process of self-reflection, understanding our own positions of like intersectionally being privileged and marginalized, and that is I think that's just I don't know that I'm necessarily, I think I'm just adding some like bullet points to what you're speaking
so
to.
beautifully what I sort of brutally because I think that I come out of a generation where consciousness raising was forced upon men if they wanted to work with lesbian separatists. Okay? I came from that time. So we started with trying to identify privilege. When you acknowledge, when I acknowledge my privilege as a white, older, gay man, when I acknowledge that, if I start there, that opens up a sensibility, hopefully, if it's done with self-examination, to exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's these roads are very hard to travel down. It's like that's why I sometimes need a friend to say, Jim, like that. Or a friend to say, or push me a little further,
Yeah.
That's the role of the artist anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's also where we find the way that we can be most like liberated in our expression is like acknowledging, I had always understood myself as marginalized in all of these ways, especially within the bubble that I grew up in. But it was in understanding and acknowledging the level of access that I had and privileges that I had, that I feel like it was there that like after that moment that my capacity to to be empowered to move through the world in an accountable way, for my art to be louder, that was such an essential component. And I know it's like an uncomfortable space. And I appreciate the way that word keeps coming up. And like that's exactly the spaces that we should be pushing past. And it might feel hard, it might feel like censorship, it might feel like I can't do everything I want, but no, you can't.
Yeah.
I just to be personal rather than theoretical, it took me a very long time to understand who I was in relation to the world I lived in and was active in. And when I discovered the definition of gender queer, it's something that absolutely resonated with every part of my body. I just stuffed all those feelings we're in a very different moment now with gender awareness. But I come from a time where that wasn't. And you just, I was a sissy fag in a straight world that had to just I thought I wanted to be in that world because of the politics that were going on. But, the embracing of identity, of my own identity, as opposed to your identity or someone else's identity, asking those questions, I think, to the artist informs their work, as I see in the representation of the work here. And so I just want to be personal, not just theoretical.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I want to talk about using privilege as well. Privilege being a check, and it shows up. It has shown up in my work. So I have an exhibit of large format digital photographs and from Israel Palestine. It's called Israel Palestine: An Act of Seeing, and you walk through it, and it's these series of diptychs of images put together. And I want everybody to see it, but my primary audience is other Jews. And I feel like that's a great privilege that I have, being a Jewish American. They'll actually come see the exhibit. Like, they will come see an exhibit with the word Palestine in it, because it's by a Jew. And that, I mean, I just want to acknowledge, that there's, when we identify what our privileges are, it's great to be able to use them.
Yeah, that speaks a lot to what you were saying, like recognizing your own privilege as an educator and being able to make more like woke privileged people. I hopefully will serve to stop what you were talking about, which is like these woke people who go into war-torn places, take pictures, and feel really good about themselves and then leave. Like that's not the kind of activism that's going to do anything. That just makes things worse oftentimes. So,
But also just to specify as a white educator, because I think the thing is like other people that I work with who are Black or Latinos, and it's harder for them. To be teaching these things right now, especially. It's more scary for them. It's more dangerous. The students, they're evaluating, I mean, there's all sorts of statistics.
On their personal lives,
Or even woman, man. I mean, there's like a lot to say about that. So, I think just to define like more specifically, because I think it can be really hard for some educators right now who are like standing in front of those classrooms. Scary.
Totally.
Scarier maybe for them, for others.
I wanted to add something about, we were talking about beauty.
Will you tell us who you are?
Oh yeah, I'm Luis from Cuniclo. And where I got the chance to really be a part of a community of artists and non-artist people that work for this political theater company based in Glover, Vermont, and they're called Bread and Puppet. And so that's where I learned how to, you can protest and you can be very active and, have many, express whatever you want to expose to the world and share it. But the way that I learn, and I mean, we learn a lot from it, is through beauty. It's like very aggressive, but at the same time, you would imagine, they are a political theater company, but they sometimes just to protest something very horrible, it would be the use of their language that is not always speaking, it's also movement, it's music, is, there's so many ways to protest in a beautiful way, whatever it means, but just a song, what we were talking about, a meal, cooking for each other, gardening, and then those things add to your aggressiveness in whatever you want to protest against or in favor, and so that's I wanted to add that it depends on the kind of language we use and how we articulate our bodies and how we share to create a community to really make an impact and really it doesn't have to be all the time
one kind of motion, like one level. It can always be, as they do there in Vermont, it's like many branches, many ways of protest. You can organize a march, but you can also have one-on-one conversation.
Can I tag into that actually really quickly? To our body shift artists, because what you were saying earlier and what other people are saying reminds me of your performance last night. We did get to do a Q&A for, in terms of your dealing with clearly very heavy topics of colonialism and racial violence and etc., but doing it through not necessarily explicit dialogue, but through music and through movement. So I don't know if you had any comments about your piece and how it kind of fits into what was just said.
Yeah, I mean, we've all touched on it already, but just like this idea of expansiveness in what we do, I think is really important in this white supremacist world, like allowing people of color and queer people and indigenous, black and brown people to define who they are through their work and through their art. 'Cause it shouldn't, I'm like against this like reification, you know, this like something that's very, like your identity is not something that, it can be this like really expansive abstract thing, you know? And I love art that is really to the point and really linear and really tells you what the fuck it is. And I love art that doesn't. I think we need everything. Because we're such complicated creatures, and there's so many different stories and histories and lineages in this room right now, and they all deserve to be honored in the way that speaks to your truth.
Yeah, I would say also it was interesting because people that have seen our show, that I think the first, when we did it at Red Cat, we didn't have a blurb. Like, you specifically were like, I don't want to mention in the blurb that this is like, you know, decolonized Filipina piece. There were certain words you didn't want to use because you didn't want people to kind of box us into this. You just wanted people to see the work and take from it.
Yeah.
And then this time, and so it's interesting people that don't know what the piece is about, but still kind of what they get from it. Like especially the part where we're vomiting, we're purging, you know, the colonialism like physically onto the floor. And even if people don't know that, kind of the viscerality of the voice, and I think something that I'm personally really interested in as a vocalist, how the voice just translates beyorial language and goes pure into, I think maybe you mentioned purely into the sensorial part of the brain. And I think that's really something that's really wonderful about making kind of interdisciplinary work in this day and age, is that someone can just get that out of the piece and then they go away with that in their brain, whereas, you know, another Filipino artist can come and they pick up all of the little cultural signifiers in the show, and they leave with a totally other heavy, you know, thing. And then other people are like, the lights are really cool, we really like them. And I'm like, I know, that makes you feel really good. It makes me feel good too. So I think that's beautiful, and I definitely feel like interdisciplinary collaboration in the present is like so wonderful for that reason. Like all of the layers of communication and protest and activism can be present in just like half hour of art.
Other questions or comments from folks who are in the audience?
Oh, June, I really like when there's, you know, something that I really love subversion. So you know, have something that's really beautiful, or some aspect of a piece, you know, really grabs somebody, and then the other thing, the message might be this grotesque thing or this other thing, but you know, like they're just like, oh, I am trying so hard to understand this message because I really want this beautiful thing out of this art, you know. So you'll just struggle with it, trying to, you know, reconcile them and accept both parts. So it's great. Anyway, I didn't get a lot of sleep, but
We have a question too here. I feel like it's not a question, more of a response, and I want to distill it because there's so many rich, very challenging and rich things coming up. But it started with beauty. It started with the question of signaling on social media and representation and all this. I'm thinking about, like, for me, the subject of beauty, also a word I want to avoid. Generally, because it's been totally co-opted, basically to move product. So has a lot of self-actualization and building and creating one's identity is now, that's in service of like modeling products, or what's in your iTunes library, or you know, all that stuff. But still, it's so important. When I bring work that's personal to me, and I personally feel like has an aspect of beauty to people who are perhaps less privileged to be exposed to the kind of artworks and things that moved and shaped me, they think, well, God, that's terribly ugly. And sometimes I can feel like I'm really quite pretentious in like forcing my new elevated standard of grotesque beauty on their communities, where they're like, yeah, I really just want to dance good, or years. And so I'm loving this like notion of like being able to like vibe with people in a multiplicitous way and understand that there's a grain of commonality and something we share. But the main thing I want to say is I feel like the most radical posture that was modeled for me in art practice from the people that have been exposed to and continue to be exposed to in this room is, and it's so radical right now, is like, what attention do we give and to whom, and for how long? And so for me, the subject of beauty isn't about like a particular configuration of an object, but like the reverence and the attitude that we bring and the attention we give to that act or that expression or that speech. And in a world where like it is powerful to slap a hashtag and to signal to others like, hi, I exist with you, and you know, it's like flicking your lighter in the stadium at each other across 10 million people, you know, we're together. It takes a moment, but like to take a little more time and to really listen or really observe someone's work and take it in, it's like deeply, deeply radical thing. Sorry to throw that down. I want to say one other thing, which is I'm feeling a lot in my queer communities, a lot of challenges right now in sort of creating those safe spaces and creating our utopian ideals. I think we should be super, super careful about acts that could have the effect of shaming or otherwise excluding others who aren't up on the signaling mechanisms that we're valuing or that we're being educated with in our institutions. So I've been subject to that, and I've been around. I think there's something to own in our queer communities about like how we are relating to each other, and be super careful that in an effort to protect each other, protect our safe spaces, that we're not marginalizing or otherwise scapegoating others. Those seem unrelated, but I wanted to throw that in. Invite a response. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone have a response to that? Around the room?
Accessibility, yeah. The whole reason for a conversation on couches versus like on a stage, and like, you know, it's like accessibility, and I struggle with that a lot too. Like, how do I talk to someone, you know, who I disagree with? How do I get past? For instance, I'm in an online group, a secret forum for like Filipino artists, and a member was posting kind of like a lot of Trump stuff, white supremacist stuff, and I was like, my initial response is like, fuck you, you're so fucking stupid, why would you do that? And then I have to And then I had to think, like, no, like, this is internalized racism. Like, how do I actually address this person coming from a place of love? How do I educate myself more so that we can have a conversation, even if we don't end up agreeing, like, because where did they come from that they don't know? They don't know the signifiers. They don't know about even what internalized racism is, you know? And I don't think necessarily maybe it's my responsibility as who I am to maybe approach someone that I feel unsafe about. Like if I see, you know, I was on jury duty and I saw this like older white man with a Trump shirt on looking menacingly at everyone in the room, and I was like, that's not my responsibility to go to that person and have a conversation. I feel terrified that maybe, you know, like another woke, like my partner is like, you know, a white guy with, you know, that can maybe approach that person to have a conversation. So I think it is like, how do we navigate this situation so that we don't, it is important to create safe spaces, but also like, who can we reach out to in our own identities and kind of, be active and be active as a form of activism also. It's a fine line because I'm not going to put myself in maybe physical danger, but I want to approach people from love because it's so easy, I think, as you were saying, to just be torn down by, just be so angry inside, and it's complicated. It's rolling around in here.
I think the question of accessibility is so interesting and so important to consider. I think. I loved your piece last night. I loved hearing you talk about the different elements people can take from it. And I think, for me, I'm always thinking about like what is the most effective way to speak to the society I'm in or to the society I'm trying to talk to. Like what is the language, the performative language that will really speak to the most people or to the or to people who need to hear it the most. And I do think humor, to go back to what Jim was saying, is something that is pretty universal in its, in its effect. Of course, different kinds of humor will respond differently to different kinds of humor. But I think trying to figure out, what is it that you can share that will communicate, and it's hard. It's let's see. I've had this conversation recently just about how much. I think there's so much in the mass media right now that I react against, and I don't want to even look at it or watch it, or or the pop art, or the stuff that's popular right now. But I have this tension. Well, I don't want to be irrelevant. I want to know what the kids are listening to, so I can speak to the kids. And it's like, how do I? But then a part of me wants to just only feed myself on things that actually really enrich me, and then have that be what inspires my art, and not necessarily try to fit in. So it's it's a tension, I guess, that I've been thinking about, and I'm wondering how do you I guess the relevance is maybe the term. How do you be relevant to a broader conversation so that you can speak to people in a way that's not from some sort of ivory tower or something. I don't know if anyone, I guess it's more of a question than really a statement. I don't have an answer to that, but it's something that I've been thinking about, and I think it's sort of
I find that doing that through personal narrative is helpful for me, and that's how I'm able to incorporate humor also.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I'm wondering if other people find that too. Like it's just all of my work is humor. Even my work on Israel Palestine is actually humorous.
Yeah.
But it comes through. It's because I always insert personal narrative, which I am ambivalent about, but it's all I can do. So that's what I do. But just wondering if other folks, like how you're able to enter that point of how the humor shows through, and how much of your personal narrative is present.
Yeah, it's interesting because that is sort of my way too. I mean, I do solo shows. I'm doing one this evening at the festival, and it is, because I think that's one thing that maybe people can never argue with, is your personal story. It's like it's your story. And everybody, that's wrong. That's not how it goes. Like, this is how it went for me. And so that is. I guess that is something I definitely drive, and that is my response to it. Even if I don't know what the kids listen to, the whole process of trying to figure it out is probably an interesting story. I want them to relate to them, not to be, the kids is just an idea.
I mean, I think it's kind of an older maybe it's like outdated as an idea, but I do think the position of subjectivity is really still so important. And I think you can go a lot, I don't know, like owning where you're placed, even if it's not all. I know what you mean, because I also use personal narrative, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't know, but I think it's really relevant and important still. And I because of my job, I have to watch like some really like some. I mean, I have to watch these movies, and I really think that it's important. Like my students curate for me what they're watching. I do a sneaky thing where, and then what they're watching, like movies that are made this year, are just filled. I mean, they're like I'm so shocked because I try to like. You know, but it's really good to see that stuff sometimes. Like I feel like I'm like racism, sexism, homophobia, like colonization, just like the most, like all of the shit, like so clearly, and it's like the hit movie.
Like it's filled with them, like as in it's challenging them, or it's like filled with.
It's just
it's promoting them. Yeah,
films that they watch, like macho, like xenophobia, like all, like really, like.
And that's what's considered funny too, is like this other
popular.
side of humor, is that
They're
so much
watching
of it's so
that
cheap,
shit.
like that.
Yeah.
Unlike the films of the past.
So it's like I'm so naive because in a way, like I really watch, like you said, like I watch my own things or whatever, and just getting out there and like visually and being like, okay, this is still going on, like even more.
Yeah.
And just like one a week with like some vodka or like whatever you need, is good. I think it's actually good. Like, we need to know
again.
Yeah. The movies.
At the same time, though, Rotimi, I would be like, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
You know, and like if you feel compelled to consider that audience and like try to cater to them, like okay, and if you don't want to, like just don't. Yeah. And I think that's that diversity of tactics is like we've got those folks who are going to be invested in doing that because you're working with those
like
kids.
My job.
Yeah. And then for you to make the choice to do that or to make the choice not to, either way is going to be radical as fuck because you're creating. You know. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mean it to be like, you should.
You should watch one of these awful movies every week.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Join this griping this week. Like, I thought, I don't have time right now to go gripe to Burger Records or to Grizzly Hall or like this, but you know, like I consume a lot of music and art, and you know, like the other day I hear a song on YouTube that I listen to on SoundCloud, and I just glance up and I see the first part of the video, and there's two men coming in chloroforming a woman, and it's not part of the story, you know, like it's just a music video. I'm like, I can't believe that this crap, this is like the freshest crap, and it's this just absolute crap. And, you know, and so I just have a list now. It's like, okay, I didn't have time to call Grizzly Hall and say, I don't think that we should have Nazi bands playing here. But I'm going to get to that. It's a list. So I'm like, you know what, that's fine. I can take my freaking time. But I'm going to call them and say, like, Burger Records, I like so many of these, you know, musicians, but what the fuck? Because, like, I'm listening to these lyrics and I'm like, what? I go to this certain neighborhood to rape women? Or here's this neighborhood where women get raped. I'm just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, are you making, like, a statement about this? Or is that just cool? Or, you know... I mean, and I've never listened to rap or hip hop at all, so I just don't even engage like with that at all. I just don't care. But I don't know. So I've just been making this list, so I'm just griping about it. But it's coming up all the time. I can't believe people are still cranking this stuff out.
I would say just to add like a little bit of like of just something to that is that, you know, we're gonna see a lot of fucked up stuff across genres, and I think like hip hop and R&B, well, hip hop more specifically, like now, it becomes like the target, and I think that's it's, and I you know, also like being Muslim and how much like Muslims are criticized for having a patriarchal culture as though there's one culture. I think it's a really frustrating thing, and there's a lot of nuance there, and that we see similar issues coded differently within other genres of music as well, and within other communities, like in the West. Yeah, I don't know Burger Records though, so I'm coming with a little less context.
It's just they've been putting a lot of stuff out, and there are a lot of popular things, you know. But I feel like I have to sort through stuff and Google everybody's background, and you know, like let's see what kind of things have they commented on social media, who are their influences, who do they associate with. You know, it's just getting like really weird, like to have to filter everything I consume, you know.
Yeah, there's
like
no joy left.
I can't just say I can't just like this song, you know, or share this song. I have to go, let me check out all the lyrics and see if I can like this or not.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's always been filter. I mean, there's always been the need to filter. I think. There's always been in this country at least art that is very oppressive or horrible, or you know, espousing the most terrible ideals, or so. I guess it's our job to create the alternatives to that crap.
That might be a great place to wrap up our conversation, that it is the job of artists to create the alternative narratives. So I hope you'll all join me in thanking the panelists.